Welcome to Antiwork Mondays. I'm back with your daily dose of juicy tea.
Petty revenge on a sibling. So my younger sister wound up becoming my manager at a restaurant we both worked at. I didn't mind that my younger sister was my manager, but she took a huge power trip with it. She made any shift we shared together a nightmare and held me to a higher expectation than anyone else. One day it was particularly bad, and tension was already high as it was extremely hot both inside and outside the restaurant, but not much we could do about it except keep hydrated. I noticed she kept her water on the counter with some lemon. I also noticed the vinegar kept on the shelf above. Every time I walked past, I'd put a squirt of vinegar in it. She was quite busy and had forgotten about her water, so there was quite a bit of vinegar in it by the time she took a sip. I'll never forget her face. Thankfully, multiple of the staff were jokesters, and I don't know if she ever knew it was me, but it was priceless. Side note, we also did it to a kid who works in the kitchen, who was quite full of himself. He'd asked for Pepsi, and one of the other jokers working decided to fill up a cup with soda and water and pour enough soy sauce in it until it was the same colour. Fairly harmless prank, but still makes me laugh to this day. Coda 1 Joe says, "Soy Petty, did it make her as sour as you were?" Coworker got sued, and then sued the company. I work in an office in Europe, and a coworker of mine, let's call him Martin, was the most respectful, funniest, happiest person I've ever met. He never complained when he got extra work, and always had a smile on his face. Our manager, let's call him Bob, was the exact opposite of Martin. His intention was to always humiliate and take advantage of people. He tried to break Martin many times with his passive aggressiveness and his toxic attitude, but was never successful. Once Martin wanted to leave early to visit his mother in hospital who suffered from cancer. But Bob gave Martin extra work with the reason that his mother was going to die anyway, and they had more important things to do. Martin turned around and gave Bob the hardest slap in the face I've ever seen anyone give. 6 people witnessed the slap, including Martin and Bob. Martin not only got fired, but was also sued by Bob. Martin pleaded self-defense and said that me and other co-workers could confirm. Me and my other co-workers also remember it that way, and indeed, Martin did act in self-defense. Then Martin sued the company because the termination of his contract was not legal since Martin didn't do anything which would violate the company's policy. Martin was represented by the union's lawyer and he got his compensation. Bob also got fired. Down the comments, NotRasta8913 says, "I would have loved to see the expression on Bob's face when the attitude adjustment arrived, and even more so when his 4 co-workers testified that it was justified." I walked out of a very shady orientation today. I'd applied for a company on Indeed.com. I know it's not the best website, but I'm relatively new to the Austin area and I don't really know any better websites. Nor do I want to walk around in Texas heat any more than I absolutely have to. The job I applied to stated a pay rate of $800 a week to start off with, and $1,000 a week once I'm done with training. Which, when you take into account my previous job experience being nothing but fast food, a potential $25 an hour seemed pretty good, assuming the job was 40 hours a week like the listing said it was. Then the red flags started popping up with the first over-the-phone interview. The job was actually 48 hours a week, not 40. Basically, it was the typical 9 to 5, but with you working Saturday as well. The second over-the-phone interview stated that the job wasn't actually handling phone calls from clients, like the posting said, but instead I'd be a sales rep with a quota to meet, although not paid on commission like you'd expect a quota-based job to be. Finally, at orientation, I was told that the training would take 6 months as opposed to 4 weeks as I'd been told, and that the training class had fees which would drop the $800 a week to $400 a week. And after the training class, I'd be knowledgeable enough to start my own sales company, which they'd be more than happy to lend me $40,000 for, as long as I could pay it back within the year, with interest of course. So I did the math on this, and the additional 8 hours per week would drop OP's income down to $16.67 per hour. And then the training fees would drop OP down to $8.84 per hour. OP based their $25 an hour estimate on the $1,000 a week. However, they've done a bait and switch on the after training income too, as they intend OP to take on debt from them, for OP to start their own business after training, not to pay OP $1,000 a week as promised. I walked out of the orientation claiming that I'd been offered a better position at a different company. The person I told put on the fakest sad face I'd ever seen, and said there's a ton of opportunity here, and it'd be unwise to throw that all away. I still declined to continue, and walked away. Was I correct in assuming that this was a scam? Basically, every bone in my body was telling me to GTFO out of there as fast as possible. My former coworker just got sweet revenge on a bad boss. To set the stage, a coworker, let's call him Bob, was fired a couple months ago. Bob oversaw a pretty large team and was well liked by everyone, both inside and outside his team, and was generally seen as an ideal employee. Unfortunately, the only person that didn't agree was Bob's boss, John. It's not exactly clear why John didn't like Bob anymore, but he claimed that Bob wasn't meeting his deadlines and goals and fired him. John then took Bob's job and reassigned about half the responsibilities because it was an unreasonable amount of work for one employee and posted the opening. There's obviously more to this story because John knew that Bob had an unreasonable amount of work, so how was he supposed to meet all his goals and deadlines? Just keeping up with the workload would mean he's overachieving compared with a new employee. So John had been interviewing candidates for Bob's replacement and had narrowed it down to some outside candidate and a former coworker, Adam. Adam used to be on Bob's team, but left shortly before Bob was fired for a much better position somewhere else. It was a big surprise to everyone that Adam wanted to come back, after making it pretty well known how dissatisfied he'd been working at our company. In any case, Adam really is perfect for the job and went through a lengthy interview process and was selected as the final candidate. John called to offer Adam the position, and he said, "No, I will never work for you again. You're the reason I left in the first place." Adam made it pretty clear that he only applied to waste John's time, since he's still friends with Bob. Panicked, John tried to call the other candidate, but he'd already accepted a better job elsewhere. Now John had to start over finding someone new. Am I the arsehole for not giving my boss my first-class seat? Yesterday, my boss and I were flying home from a conference. We were on the same flight, but our original seats were not next to each other. I'm a frequent flyer with this airline, and I use their credit card, so I often get free upgrades to first class. I got upgraded on this flight, but my boss did not. After the flight, when we were collecting our bags, she said she wanted to talk to me about my lack of respect for protocol. She thinks that because the company paid for my original ticket, and she's more senior than me, I should have given her my first-class seat. I think this is absolutely insane. While the company paid for my seat, it's my own personal credit card spending and frequent travel that earned me the upgraded seat. Is this some sort of corporate standard that I'm not aware of? Am I the arsehole? Down in the comments, Gilded Lady says, not the arsehole. You can always email HR and ask, X happened while on this trip, and Manager Y advised that I should have done Z. Can you point me to where I can review the protocols so I know going forward? It documents the incident without being accusatory. Opie responds and says, this is a really helpful suggestion. She has retaliated against other employees who have raised concerns about her attitude with HR before, so this tact feels a little bit more comfortable to me than an outright complaint. Someone asks if HR knew about the retaliation. OP says, I know a former coworker who mentioned it in an exit interview. This former coworker was questioned by our boss about why he had so many doctor's appointments. He reported to HR, and then our boss screamed at him. 2 months later, there's an update. Thanks to the many of you kind Redditors who made me realise that 1, I was not the arsehole in this situation, and 2, I was in a very toxic work environment. I took the advice many of you gave and clarified the policy with HR. The company, of course, did not have this policy. I also took your advice to get out of that job quickly, and I'm now happy to say that I'm starting a new job in 3 weeks. I know the person who'll be my supervisor in my new job, and she's a very kind and normal person. I'm pretty nervous to give my notice to my toxic boss on Monday, but oh well, if she's nasty, then my 2 weeks notice will just become an immediate resignation. We live in a one-party consent for recording state, and I plan to record the phone conversation to protect myself. Thanks to all of you for giving me the push to move on. Down in the comments, Emergency Boat 7040 says, boy, that boss is going to feel all kinds of stupid for losing an employee over throwing a fit over an airplane seat. Grawley4 responds and says, I want to congratulate you on apparently only ever having good bosses. This boss isn't going to feel stupid. They're going to think that OP is an entitled brat who left a good job. They'll think it's a good job, because they couldn't follow a simple rule and complain about entitled workers these days to anyone who will listen, so mainly their captive employees. Yeah, unfortunately Gruely4 is probably right about this. Boss suggested that we stop taking our breaks so that we can get more work done. Had a Zoom meeting yesterday and the boss suggested that going forward we stop or drastically shorten our breaks so that we're able to get more work done. I've worked at this company only 3 weeks now, and unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me that she said that. I'm pissed, but as we're given way too much of a workload that we have to finish before we're allowed to clock out for the day, it's often that we work through our lunch break anyway, or stay an hour late. Some other lovely things that this god-awful woman has said/done in my short 3 weeks of being at this company. My first day on the job and my login for an account wasn't working, which the person training me said would happen, and I just had to email IT so they could finish setting up my account. Easy fix that was sorted within an hour, and all was well. The next morning, I had an email from my boss lady saying I shouldn't have done that, and I should refrain from asking questions and to do things myself, along with calling me a bad fit for the company if I was to keep doing things like that. I also have a very important appointment at the end of June, which I made sure the company was aware of during my initial interview. It was no problem, of course, as this was an hour-long appointment that at the time of my interview was nearly 4 months out. Well, I reminded my boss of this appointment recently, and the answer I received from her was that this was no longer okay. The schedule isn't even made yet or anything. She just simply doesn't want to give me the time off, and this was the only explanation I got. So now I plan to call in sick that day with no shame. Down in the comments, it's Static Spinach 515 says, massive red flag on your first day. If you can afford it, get the hell out of there immediately. If not, find another job and then quit. It will not get better. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. Opie replies and says, yeah, I'd already be long gone by now, but I'm expecting a baby this fall, and I just need enough hours for mat leave. It's tough, but at this point, I just need to put my head down, push through for the next 2 months, and then I'll have enough hours. Oh, even better, take him for all the mat leave you can. I hope OP lives in a country that gives good mat leave, because after dealing with this, she deserves it. Manager wanted me to work for free today, so I quit on the spot. My job was in the cosmology and aesthetics industry, making $10 an hour plus 4% commission on services. The industry normally doesn't pay well, and it's very hard to make a living without owning your own business, but the pay at my job was especially low. The business hadn't been picking up for spring as quickly as the owners liked, so the employees were expected to pick up the slack, including attending multiple mandatory unpaid events where we advertised the company at local festivals. The final straw came when my boss asked me to perform $150 worth of services on an influencer for free. Why should I go the extra mile and put in all this effort for the 4 measly cents to every dollar my boss makes? Count me out. Update. Thanks for all the replies, guys. I'll look into getting my unpaid wages back. I mainly came to tell you all that I found the influencer I was supposed to perform the services on. She had 1,100 followers on Instagram. Her post at my job got 12 likes. Wow, with that kind of following, I'm surprised you managed to find her at all. But hey, your boss got 12 exposures, and it only cost him $150 and an employee. I quit and they tried to get me arrested. I was working a second job at our local small grocery and butcher shop a few nights a week to pay for my kids' activities. I was hired as a cashier. The person that did the end-of-day butcher shop cleanup and sanitizing quit. So instead of hiring someone new for the cleanup, the owners decided that the cashiers could just do it in between customers. The owners sat in their office watching TV and messing around, and when a customer came in, the doorbell would ring. They would buzz a phone in the butcher area for the cashier to come and check them out. When I came in for my shift at 6 p.m, I was told about the new setup and I told them no. I was not hired to clean up the butcher area, I was hired to run the register and stock shelves. The owner said I would clean the butcher shop or I'd consider myself fired and walked away. I said fine and grabbed my things and left. Apparently the owner thought I'd given in and was doing the cleaning. So apparently they buzzed the butcher area when customers came in for about 2 hours before someone told them that no one was coming to check them out. The store's liquor area, cigarettes and scratches all got emptied out. It was 7:30 and I got a screaming phone call from the owner about how he's going to call the police and I was going to get arrested. Yeah, right. The owner actually did call the police. The owner stated he wanted me arrested as an accomplice to the thieves because I'd left. The cops asked me to come to the store, which I did, and I explained that the owner had fired me, so I went home. And the CCTV should prove that. The tape was reviewed, and plain as day the owner said I was fired. They estimate the loss at about $30,000. Sneaky coworker revenge. I have this one coworker who's been with the company since its inception. My boss used to let her get away with everything, with bullying, harassing everyone in the office, with no repercussions, unless the animosity was directed at him. When it was directed at him, he'd go full passive-aggressive and make her even more insecure than she already is. This woman was a real miserable bitch. God help the person who brought a mistake she made to her attention. The next 30 to 60 minutes, sometimes an entire day, would be dedicated to finding every mistake the poor soul ever made. She's been really sneaky about not doing her job and pawning off her work to others. She will busy herself with trivial shit and say, "I'm dealing with so-and-so and it took me over an hour," or "I have a lot on my plate, I guess that slipped my mind. Would you mind handling it?" Yesterday, I figured out one of her tactics. Someone needed a letter of on-time payment from their previous provider to have their deposit waived. One company has a dedicated broker line for us specifically. They've stated before to please email for letters of on-time payment, not call the broker line, as that's for emergencies. When she was pressed about a task that needed a letter of on-time payment, she said that she emailed the client and said a conference call was in order. She was told by several of us that that's not the proper protocol. She knew this, but she did not want to send the email because that's too much work, so she danced around the issue. I called her out on it, and it didn't work this time. She spent more time arguing than it would have taken to send the damn email. My boss even got in on the message and told her to stop arguing and do her job. That's all she ever got, a little slap on her meat hook of a hand. She proceeded to rip me a new one in a personal message and told me what a bitch I am, blah blah blah. I copied that message and went back through other messages she'd sent my personal channel, calling my boss a bald bitch, saying that she didn't blame his wife for cheating on his cheap, rude ass, calling his son a piece of shit, calling him an elitist butt crack, etc. I sent all of those messages to my boss, and I told him I think her language is rather unprofessional, and I don't appreciate being called a bitch. I really don't care, I just wanted him to see all the stuff directed at him. He sent a message saying he'd be a few hours late this morning. We all work from home. He drove to her house and fired her, and collected all of his office equipment. As prideful as she is, of course, she didn't tell a soul. He came in and set up a Zoom meeting and told us Negative McGee is no longer with the company. Petty as hell, but I don't care. Embarrass managers in front of co-workers? Prepare to feel the revenge. My first job after college was as the accountant for a motel with one of the city's best restaurants and property. For time reference, this was long before cell phones. The property owners were a family who preferred to leave the daily running of the business to the staff. Each week we had a staff meeting led by the head chef, male, and the lead host, female. After I'd worked there for about a year, they hired a new catering manager, and she and I quickly became friends. When workload permitted, we would get together and talk, but our work did not suffer because of our friendship. Then one day at a staff meeting, the paper copy of the agenda was handed out to us, and as per usual, I didn't read it. Instead, I just listened to and participated in the meeting. I did notice other people in the meeting glancing at me with odd expressions on their faces, but I didn't question it. When I returned to my office, the front desk manager walked in with me and asked, "What did you think of the last agenda item?" She had a wickedly amused expression on her face. I shook my head and then looked at the agenda. The last line said, "Accountant and catering manager should spend less time talking to each other." The head chef did not discuss this in the meeting, but the damage was done. All the hotel managers had seen it in writing, and many shared it with their employees. I was furious. The catering manager and I discussed it and decided to ignore the whole thing while also ignoring the head chef as much as possible. But there was a lit firecracker in play. The head chef and the lead host were both married to their respective spouses, and they were having a hot affair on property. What hypocrites! All the staff knew about this. There were security videos of the chef and the host going to empty hotel rooms during the day and coming out an hour later. Staff told stories of catching the two of them in the dry goods storage room and seeing the two of them in the back seat of their cars. A few weeks later, we were informed that the family who owned the business had sold it to another company and the handover would occur in a month. None of us were sure of our jobs, but my job was on the line more than anyone else's. It made perfect sense for the incoming owners to put their own accountants in place. So I updated my resume, leaving the ending date blank. A month later, the new company came in and had their two accounting staff follow me around to see how things were done. I knew it was just a matter of time before I was let go. 3 weeks later, I was asked to come to the manager's office, where I found the new company's management team and the personnel manager. This was pre-human resources. They were kind and gave me an excellent reference letter and a month's severance pay, and then they asked, "Are there any concerns you have with the way the business is running? And please be as candid as possible. We will not reveal it was you who shared the information." Time for that lit firecracker to explode. I explained how I was worried about the repercussions that were a distinct possibility due to the extramarital affair between two upper management persons. Complete silence. All the staff knows about it. We've seen videos of them entering hotel rooms together and coming out much, much later. And the staff reports seeing them in the act in the storage room. Shocked stares. I would not say anything about this if neither of them were married, but they both have spouses and children, and I can imagine the blowback if one or both the spouses found out about this. Blowback that would most likely occur on hotel property. They had me name the people involved, including the affair havers, and the staff who had proof and details of the occurrences. Then they thanked me, handed me my termination paperwork, took my keys and badge, and I was gone. The fallout, as told to me by my friend, the catering manager. The lead host was laid off within days of me leaving, and the head chef was put on a 1-year probation and sent to classes for, I guess, appropriate behaviour in the workplace? And he was not allowed to lead any more staff meetings. You know, I just felt lucky that I never needed to go into that nasty, dry storage room. Greedy owner tries to rip off my friend, ends up paying him double. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy has money, but he would cheat and lie, anything to have paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become part of their broadcast package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system so that we could start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day we failed to do this past the deadline means the owner would suffer a penalty per the contract. Not knowing how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000 US, he can get a system that will automate the entire process, which of course this guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend to find a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what piece of shit this guy is, I warned my friend to not front the money because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work. We went live on schedule and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with the bill. Immediately, the usual excuses started. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" etc, etc. Then my friend pulls out the trump card. Not only did my friend threaten to take all the equipment back and take the station off air, he reveals that in order to get the uplink working for cheap, someone has to come in every single day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes less than 5 minutes, but of course no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed, plus a $2,000 a month consulting fee, or the station goes dark and he starts paying a penalty to DirecTV. The fucker paid. Fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 a month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story, only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run.
Remember, I post new content every day, so subscribe for more juicy tea.